The next step in photo editing workflow that I use is to fix any white balance issues. And that is under this option up here. It's the top button. It's those three little lines that look like sliders. And then under the color drop down, you can click the arrow to see all of these options. So with color, this is fixing your white balance, making adjustments to saturation and things like that. So you have multiple options for fixing white balance. You have a preset option up here with this drop down. Depending if you're editing a RAW photo or a JPEG photo, you will see more options. Since this is a RAW photo, we have all of these options or presets. So if we say to Lightroom that this light here was tungsten light, then it's going to adjust it to that. The reason why this looks so bad is because this wasn't tungsten light. This was more of like cloudy or shade. Shade, a little bit too much. Underneath this shade shelter, that looks decent, but I would say more like daylight, looks like proper white balance. You also have what's called this white balance color picker or selector. So if you click that eyedropper and then you go in your image to something that is white or neutral and then click it, it will balance everything else to that color. So there really isn't something that's white in this image. If I click this green, it's going to not work because we're telling Lightroom that this green should be white or neutral, and then it tries to balance all of the other colors to it. If I click in the sky, again, the sky was a little blue, so that doesn't work. So for this image, I don't think the white balance selector will work. Let's just go back to daylight. And they also have an auto setting that will try to adjust it automatically, but I don't really like that, so I'm going to keep it at daylight. Let me just go to another photo really quick. So let's see our images. Let's go to something that does have white in it. So this image has white. We still have our white balance color selector up. So if we click something that is white, then it should work. Now, the tricky thing is it can't be completely overexposed, because if there's a white part like this area right here that's completely overexposed, it's going to ask you to pick something that's darker that has actual information in the image. This sidewalk down here is gray, so that might work. Yeah, that looks pretty good. If I click over here on this wall right here, which is gray, it makes everything a bit warm because these lights are fluorescent, and it just warms those up based off of the cool lights that were shining on this brick wall. Now this brick wall or the cement wall looks more neutral, but the rest of it looks warm. So I think this sidewalk down here at the bottom is mostly the best neutral gray to use for this image. Okay, so let's go back to this photo down here, turn off our film strip. So that's how you use the white balance selector up here. If you want, you can also use these sliders. So if I take the temperature slider to the left or to the right, this is a manual way of adding warmth or making it more cooler. To reset, just click the title of the effect right there to reset it. You also have tint, which goes from green to magenta. Depending on what lighting you're under, if you're under some sort of fluorescent lighting, sometimes you get sort of a green tint. So you might want to combat that by adding some magenta to it. That will really show up in different photos, and we'll actually see that not necessarily under fluorescent lighting, but under this photo, we might want to add a bit of magenta because we're getting so much green from all of the greenery that is bouncing light around me. So with this photo though, you can also type in a specific temperature here. So I know that sunlight is around 56 to 5700 Kelvin. So if I tell Lightroom that, hey, we want our white balance to be 5600, then that works pretty good at getting a proper white balance. So you can type in numbers there as well. You can also just click this black and white button if you want to make your photo completely black and white, or without that selected, you can drop the saturation here to the left to get rid of any color, and then increase it to increase the saturation of all the colors in your image, which can make things very colorful. Vibrance, the last slider that we kind of just skipped in this panel, is a way of adding colors in a more intelligent way. Let's go to this photo of me and show you what happens when I increase the saturation. All the colors look really good. The greens look and pop really nicely now. But what happens to my skin is you see a lot of reds, the oranges and yellows in my face get a lot more saturated, and that looks pretty unnatural and unflattering. Let me reset this. And so vibrance is an intelligent way where if you drag this up to the right, all of the colors except for the skin tone colors are more saturated. So the greens, blues, all of those things will get more saturated, but the skin tones will look better. Dragging to the left, you can see that it's decreasing the saturation of all the colors, but the last things that it's really affecting are my skin tones. So here, if I increase the vibrance and then use the before and after right here, you can see the before and after. It's a subtle change right now. To reset any of these sliders, you can also just double click on the slider that you've made changes to, and that will reset it, which is similar to Lightroom Classic CC. So that's the color tab. We will dive into this color adjustment or color mixer in a future lesson, but basically I wanted to show you how you fix white balance. And since we're in this tab, I showed you vibrance and saturation as well. Next, we're going to go back up to the light options here, which would be the next step of editing your photos.